What do you do when self-doubt creeps in? I'm going to share my current struggles with self-doubt and what has helped me on this episode of the Speaking Your Brand podcast. More and more women are making an impact by starting businesses, running for office, and speaking up for what matters. With my background as a TV political analyst, entrepreneur, and speaker, I interview and coach purpose-driven women to shape their brands, grow their companies, and become recognized as influencers in their field. This is Speaking Your Brand, your place to learn how to persuasively communicate your message to your audience. Hi there, and welcome to the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Carol Cox. Today, we are talking about self-doubt. And the reason we're talking about it is because I've had my own experience with self-doubt rather recently. If you listened to the episode a couple of weeks ago about writing books, you'll know that I'm working on a book proposal, which will eventually turn into a book. And wow, there's definitely self-doubt creeping in around writing the book proposal, not so much around my idea. I'm in love with my idea about the importance of public speaking as a way to advance women's leadership and gender equality. And I cannot wait to dig in. I can bring in my love of history and the history work that I did in graduate school. I can bring in obviously all the work that we do at Speaking Your Brand. So I'm super excited about the idea. But what's kind of tripping me up is that I am used to writing short form content now. I've trained myself as a marketer to write short emails and short LinkedIn posts. And I'm finding it really hard to actually expand upon my idea because I'll write, a couple of paragraphs. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. I got my idea out, but no, there's so much more to say here. So the self-doubt is definitely creeping in. And so I wanted to talk about this in today's episode because sometimes it may be obvious to you that you're feeling self-doubt. You may know, okay, I'm really not sure about what I'm doing here. It could be, can I really do this? Is this something that I'm up to? Is it something that I'm capable of doing? But sometimes self-doubt can masquerade as procrastination, avoidance, boredom, shiny object syndrome, distractions, filling up your to-do list and calendar with other things, even deciding to clean things that you probably don't need to be cleaned or could wait. Just anything that you're doing to avoid whatever it is that you know that you really should be working on. And it's usually when we're trying to do something that's outside of our comfort zone, something that we're not used to doing, where self-doubt creeps in, and which is exactly what's happening when I'm working on this book proposal. So recently I was talking with a colleague about my self-doubts, and she said to me, Carol, you've accomplished a lot. So that means you've faced self-doubt in the past. What does the process look like for you? So if I've gotten through this in the past, which I have, think about, what helped me at the time and apply that to what's going on now. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you my own challenges with self-doubt and what I do when it comes up. So hopefully this will be helpful to you to hear what I do, but then also think about what has been helpful to you in the past and how can you apply that when self-doubt comes up again. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. At Speaking Your Brand, we help women entrepreneurs and professionals clarify their brand message and story, create their signature talks, and develop their thought leadership platforms. And we know that self-doubt can come up when we're putting ourselves out there in bigger ways, which is why we are such big proponents of both one-on-one coaching and the group programs and communities that we provide. If you'd like to learn more about what we do and how we can work together, go to speakingyourbrand.com. Now, let's get on with the show. What is self-doubt? I looked it up in the dictionary, and here's what Merriam-Webster has to say. Self-doubt is a lack of faith in oneself, a feeling of uncertainty about one's abilities and actions. So if you think about that, a lack of faith in oneself. So self-doubt arises when we don't feel like we're capable of doing whatever it is that we've set out to do. So for you, that could be maybe you're working on a speaking engagement, a presentation that you've been invited to give, and some self-doubt creeps in about the content or the message that you're sharing. Like I mentioned in the intro, for me, it's this book proposal that I'm working on right now. And so where does self-doubt come from? Sometimes it can come from previous negative experiences. So if we have done something in the past that's the same as what we're working on right now or similar, and maybe that thing did not go well in the past, we assume perhaps that the current iteration of it will also not go well. So then that self-doubt arises. Self-doubt can also come from previous experiences that were positive. So not negative, but previous positive experiences. But you felt that they weren't really achieved because of you. This is kind of like that imposter syndrome. Like, okay, that experience went well. Like I did really well at that in speaking engagement, or I did really well in that thing that I was working on, but it wasn't really because of my talents or my experience. It was just because of luck or something. Like we'll think it was something else, not really us, but it was really you. Self-doubt can also come from comparing ourselves to others. So we see what other people are doing and think that whatever we're doing, our ability or our actions should look just like theirs. And of course, we know in reality that it's not going to look just like theirs, but that doesn't necessarily stop us from going there. Self-doubt can also come from wanting things to be a certain way. Like this is where kind of that perfectionism can arise, where we're working on something and it just doesn't seem perfect enough. Like if we just keep iterating and working on it, it's going to get to that level of perfectionism. I have abandoned perfectionism a long time ago. I just got to the age where I just didn't have the time and the energy to be a perfectionist anymore. So that's not where my particular brand of self-doubt comes from. I believe in iterating because you want things to be better, but I actually iterate in public. So email messages that I send out, to the email list, LinkedIn posts, this podcast, like I literally iterate in public because I want to get that feedback from you listening and from you reading my emails and LinkedIn posts and so on. So self-doubt can also come from just not having done something before at all. So this is something maybe brand new that you're doing. Maybe you've been asked to give a keynote and you've never delivered a keynote before. Or maybe you're doing a sales webinar for the first time and you've never actually sold something on a webinar. Perhaps you're doing a full day or a half day workshop for an organization and you've never done a workshop for that length of time before, maybe whether it's in person or virtual. So it could be also from things that we just haven't done before. And this is where that book proposal self-doubt is coming in. So here's the process that I use when I'm struggling with self-doubt. And they all happen to start with the letter R, because if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know how much that we like alliterations and acronyms. So of course, as I started making this list, I found a way to make them all the same letter. So we're going with R's. And I don't do all of these things in that moment, say that day that I realize I'm having self-doubt. This is not like a linear process. I don't check all these things off the list. I may do some of them sometimes more than others. So take what I'm using for my own process and see what would work best for you. But really what I want you to do is think about self-doubt that you've had in the past and what was helpful to you to get over it. So the first thing that I do is that I recognize, so R, recognize that I'm feeling self-doubt. And I sit with it quietly. I'll think of, where is it showing up in my body? Am I feeling it in my chest or in my belly? Or am I kind of feeling it in my head? And usually what triggers me to start recognizing that self-doubt is creeping in is those behaviors that I mentioned in the intro: procrastination, distractions, shiny object syndrome, filling up my to-do list with other things, cleaning parts of the house that don't need to be cleaned. So I'm avoiding what it is that I should be working on. So then I recognize that I'm doing that and sit with it quietly. And then I'll remind myself of my past accomplishments. So kind of give myself a little bit of a boost, a confidence boost. I have a list in Evernote that I keep of all my accomplishments, like going to graduate school, becoming chairperson of my local Democratic Party, going on TV for the first time in 2005, building this business. Like I have a list of all of these things, and it sounds kind of hokey. And, I probably should just remember these things. But when these times when the self-doubt creeps in, it's really helpful to have a list that's already been written before, so you can just go look at it and remind yourself of these things that you've accomplished. I will also write love notes to myself. So kind of present day love notes. I call them love notes, where I'll just write in my journal, like the things that I'm really happy about, or, clients that are happy with the work that we're doing together. So I'll just it's like a gratitude journal. So these love notes to myself to remind myself of things that I've done. So that's the second R, is remind. The third R is reflect. I'll reflect on why I want to do the thing that's hard right now. Most likely the self-doubt is creeping in because the thing that I'm doing is hard. And that's exactly the case with this book proposal. So then I'll ask myself, why is this journey important to me? Why do I want to take this journey with writing a book? Why is the final outcome important to me? So why do I want an actual book at the end of this process? The book proposal first and then the actual book. And here's the even more important question than the actual outcome or deliverable at the end, is who will I become if I stick with this? So if I kind of stop the procrastination and stop the avoidance and stop the distractions, Who will I become if I stick with this process? And I think that is the most telling thing about why we do hard things. The fourth R is release. Release expectations that what I'm working on is going to go a certain way. The Buddhists would call this non-attachment. So non-attachment to the process or non-attachment to the outcome. Yes, there may be things that will interrupt something that we're working on, whether that interruption is for a day or a week or a month or a season or a year, where something that we wanted to do, just we have to release expectations that it's going to go a certain way and redirect that energy to somewhere else. And that's okay. Things, I believe, will turn out as they will in the right time, yet also knowing that it takes effort to get things done. But release expectations that they have to be a certain way. The next R is reach out. So I'll reach out to someone I trust, whether it's my husband, a friend, my own coach, whether it's my book coach or my business coach, and talk to them about what I'm experiencing. Because really just having someone as a sounding board, not that they're going to solve it for you or tell you how great they are. Well, my husband and my friends will, but so that's what we need them for. But coaches, really what they will do is they'll help you to see why you want to do this thing in the first place. What's that positive thing that you want at the end and who you'll become when you stick with it. So reach out to someone that you trust. And then the next R is reveal. So reveal your goal or your project to others, make it public. And the reason I like making things public is because it gives me accountability so that I'm putting it out there that I'm doing this thing and I want to accomplish this thing. And also it's a way to get support so that other people know that you're working on something and then they can give you that support when you need it. So reveal your goal and project to others, make it public. And so of all these different things that I do when I'm struggling with self-doubt, recognize that I'm feeling it, remind myself of past accomplishments, reflect on why I want to do the thing that's hard right now, release expectations that it's going to go a certain way, reach out to someone I trust, reveal my goal and project to others, make it public. So all of those things are incredibly important. And here is the most important thing when I really think about the past and where I have gotten through self-doubt is taking action. And especially having to do something by a certain date because there are external deadlines I can't control. This is why when I launched this podcast back in 2017, I tied the release date to a conference I was speaking at. I wanted the podcast to be live by then. That was an external deadline. I couldn't shift that date. I couldn't control it. So I had to get past the self-doubt that I experienced launching this podcast so that it would be live. That's why I hired a book coach so that I would have that external deadline and accountability to keep me on track. That's why so many of our clients work with us in VIP days or in our Thought Leader Academy because they want that accountability and support and those external deadlines and milestones to reach. So taking action is really the best way that has worked for me to get past self-doubt. I would love to know, what do you do when you face self-doubt? What processes or what things have worked well for you? You can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Carol Cox on LinkedIn. The link's also in the show notes. That's a social media platform that I hang out on the most. You can also email me, carolcox@speakingyourbrand.com. I will say that having self-doubt is normal. It can mean that you're trying new things, trying things that are beyond what you're naturally good at. You're doing something that's a bigger project or a bigger goal. And so a lot of times self-doubt is a normal side effect of that. And I know that the women that we work with, whether it's one-on-one or in our Thought Leader Academy, experience this too. And this is why I really love the group experience of the Thought Leader Academy, in addition to the one-on-one coaching calls, is because it normalizes these feelings that we all have. I remember a Thought Leader Academy group call that we had last year. One of the women brought up that she was experiencing self-doubt in pitching herself for speaking engagements and for podcast interviews. And I appreciate that she was so vulnerable in sharing that with the group because we were able to help her with some strategies for her to do the podcast pitching and put out the speaking proposals and things like that. And so not only did it help her to put this out there in the group, but I know that it helped other women who were hearing her and what she was struggling with. If you would like to join our Thought Leader Academy to work on your thought leadership, your signature talks, and your visibility and revenue strategy, I invite you to submit your application today. You can get all of the details by going to speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/academy. On our next podcast episode, we're going to be talking about closing the gender speaking gap. So you may have heard of the gender pay gap, which is that women get paid less than men for the same job. Well, there's also a gender speaking gap, and that's what my guest Kristen Oakley and I talk about. And this is an important topic because when we as women speakers experience self-doubt, we tend not to put ourselves out there. We tend not to submit speaking proposals and so on. But we need more women speakers. We need more women speakers on main stages, and we need more women speakers getting paid to speak. So make sure to click follow on your podcast app so you don't miss next week's episode and the future ones. Until next time, thanks for listening.